So today we performed our primary school theatre and education piece to our target audience. The overall response was a very positive one, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it and be really engaged and wanting to contribute. We seated the audience kind of similarly to how we seated them in our previous TIE, which was have clear sections of seating. So we had four sections with distinct gaps in between. However, it differed because in the previous TIE piece it was curved seating. However, this time it was very much straight on, looking at the front, which meant that we didn't have to be so aware of angles. We just had to make sure that we didn't turn our backs to the audience, which on a forward-facing audience wasn't as difficult and wasn't as we didn't have to be so aware. The audience responded very well to our high energy beginning straight away, engaging, and they found the comedy in this satirical representation of a secondary school, which is what we wanted, as it creates a connection with the audience straight away and captures their attention straight away, which of course is what we wanted. And we kept full energy throughout the play, creating a very exciting, enthusiastic atmosphere, which the audience responded well to. The connection we created with the audience through the different ways, such as comedy, conversational language, eye contact, not only made the audience feel they could participate, but actively want to contribute and interact with us, which create a very friendly, sharing atmosphere. During the facilitation, the audience's suggestions were relevant to what we were looking for, and which showed that they were really engaged and really listening to what we were saying and taking on board the messages which we were trying to get across. Although when they did need us to guide them towards an answer quite subtly, we did a good job using the techniques, which didn't make us come off as pushy, and instead felt like us and the student were working together. And the students responded really well to us and coming to the conclusions which we were leading them to. We were very positive with them, using very positive language and responding positively to their suggestions with encouragement and saying how good their ideas were and how well they were contributing, which really encouraged them to keep contributing ideas and expanding on ideas as well. So not only suggesting them but also expanding on their points, which is something which is very educational and something that's really good to do. The audience responded well to our personal stories and the characters that we created, seeming to make a connection with these stories. When we did forum theatre, they seemed to relate to the scenarios we presented, coming up with suggestions of what they would do within the scenario, which kind of shows that connection between them and the scenarios that we're presenting, and how realistic they feel to them. Arguably, the most interactive activity in the piece was the game show, and that went down really well. Everyone wanted to get involved. It was a really fun activity. Me and my co-leader of our group, Megan, made sure that everyone in our group was involved and responded to everyone's suggestions in a positive, friendly manner. And it created a very fun, bear in mind competitive, but very fun activity, very fun environment where lots of good suggestions came out, and we very much wanted the suggestions to come from the students themselves and the audience members themselves, which again very much was the aim of the activity, because we wanted them to come up with the ideas so that they could feel like they can handle themselves in these kind of situations if they happen to experience them. And that worked perfectly. And when we got to the conclusion and spoke about how they could, how they can handle these situations and their responsibility isn't so terrifying, it really kind of connected, and I felt like they really connected with it and really understood that message. At the end of the piece, we split into groups again, taking a group each and letting them ask us any questions they had about secondary school or our performance. The students were very responsive, asking lots of questions, indicating that we had made that connection with them and they did feel comfortable talking to us, which is something we really wanted to do, as that is like the best way to get across messages. If they feel like they can trust us and feel like that feel that they can relate to us and that we can give them relevant and useful advice and information. This question session also made me feel like their worries, made sure that their worries were addressed and that they knew what to expect once they arrived in secondary school, which again makes it less scary for them. If you know what to expect, it's less scary. And I believe this really helped them feel a bit happier about their transition into secondary school, which was our aim of the piece. We really wanted to kind of limit that stress and fear, and I feel like that having that question session at the end, really they left in a positive, feeling very positive about this transition. So some stuff that didn't go quite as well was at the beginning of the piece. A lot of us got a bit caught up in the high energy atmosphere and kind of sped up our pace of our lines, meaning that some of our lines at the beginning lacked clarity, which can mean that they could become lost, so the audience could like miss information, and that's of course not what we want. But however, we managed to slow ourselves down and get back onto a better pace, when we got a bit further along in the play, where our words once again had clarity, which it was good that we managed to pull ourselves back and make sure that we slowed down and made sure every word could be heard. In addition to this, I would have liked to have a few more suggestions for the bullying scenarios. I feel like that felt quite short. I feel like the audience would have benefited from seeing a few more scenarios play out. So I think we should have collected a few more suggestions before moving on to the telling the teacher, because I felt like we had a very limited range of suggestions, and if we'd carried on, maybe had a fight come up, maybe have a couple of others come up, and so they could really see and have some very because it's very limited range of suggestions. It had a few more different scenarios play out for them, so they could see how that would, or what reaction would, what outcome would happen from reacting that way. Because I feel like a lot of people, their first reaction is to fight, stand up for themselves, kind of thing, and we didn't get to see that. Furthermore, I think that we should have been a bit more organised in deciding which group we went to talk to when we facilitated, when we went out into the audience and talked to groups of the audience members. Because I felt at the time at times it was a bit disorganised, because we hadn't worked out beforehand which group we were going to. We hadn't worked out a pattern. It was just kind of like we go out, try and find a group that was free, that without a facilitator, and if they're like all the groups had kind of, because I found that because some people got there quicker, the groups tended to merge into bigger groups, so we ended up having to split up the groups so we could have more groups to talk to and facilitate with, and so we could have because we wanted smaller groups if possible, because then we could speak to them on a more intimate, personal level. But having to do this process felt a bit messy and disorganised, which is kind of really not what we wanted. I wanted everything to run smooth. I thought everything should have run more smoothly, more fluidly, which would have seemed more professional. I also thought it meant, because we were just going out and trying to find a free group, it meant that we ended up speaking to the same group of people at the time, and I felt like we should have been speaking to different groups of people so we could get make a connection with multiple members of the audience, and to or interact with them, because we'd have different interactions with them and get different suggestions from them. and we didn't get that because I felt like we were often going to the same groups of people which we'd already talked to. So that's something that I would do differently next time, if we were to do it again. However, overall, I feel like we did a good job. I felt like the messages we were trying to get across resonated with them, and felt that we helped them with their fear of transitioning into secondary school, which was, at the end of the day, the aim of our piece, and I felt like we really achieved that.